Hi everyone, in this video of Accelerated Chess Dragon we're going to be looking at how to play the Sicilian defense, and to be more specific, the Accelerated Dragon when white plays the move for queen takes d4. Now what do I mean when I say this? Well, white will play e4, black will play c5, white will go knight f3, g6 by black, d4, c takes d4, this is all very standard. However, this next move is what could be played sometimes, and I think you need to be aware of how to defend against it. So here, white will actually play the move queen takes d4. And the idea of this queen takes d4 move is mainly to attack the rook, but it's also to develop the queen. However, usually, like the chess principles state, it's not a good idea to develop your queen very early on in the game, and you'll see how that can be punished. So black will play knight s6, so blocking the attack towards the rook, and here white has three moves: e5, bishop to b5, and knight to c3. We're going to be looking at knight c3 first, and if this move is played, then black goes knight c6. Queen to a4 by white, d6 by black, and now e5 by white. And now whenever I usually see this move, I get very confused, and I sometimes start playing the move d takes e5. Now after analyzing this position a lot more, I realized that the best move is actually just knight g4. And I've learned that knight g4 is better because, well, even if the knight is going to get kicked away, you're putting pressure towards e5 at least. So after e takes d6, you're not actually going to capture the pawn on d6. You're just going to develop the bishop. And this is the major thing about the move for queen takes d4. Many people aren't usually ready to give up the material in order to play this variation. So you need to know how to do this. So bishop g7, you develop the bishop. You're not really worried about the material at the moment. You're so far just concerned about development. So white will go h3, black will go knight g5, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now bishop h6. Capturing on e7 would only help black's development, so it's not really a good idea. So bishop to h6, and here black will play bishop c3 check, bc3, and now queen takes d6. And essentially, white's pawn structure is completely ruined, and black can easily activate his bishop on c8. This bishop on h6, maybe even if it can play bishop g7 and prevent black from castling, it's not going to be a big deal, because all black is really going to do is just develop his pieces and maybe castle queenside if the opportunity presents itself. And black isn't really going to be too concerned about the position if bishop g7 is played and he's denied castling rights on the king side. So the other move instead of knight c3 is bishop to b5. And if you go bishop to d5, then there's a6 by black. And now here's where the position gets really crazy. White will now play e5, and here black plays a takes b5, e takes f6, and now knight c6 by black. And here white has three moves to choose from: queen to h4, queen to e3, and f takes e7. We're first going to be looking at f takes e7, and if this move is played, queen takes e7 check by black. And now there's an attack towards the queen, so the only place to block the check and also defend the queen is queen to e3. Now, unfortunately, in this scenario, black is now forced to trade queens. But he's not going to do it just yet. First, he's going to play b4, and this is trying to restrict the development of this b1 knight, mainly to stop it from developing these squares c3 and a3, mainly c3. And now after castles by white, black trades queens, bishop g7 by black, and black is threatening the move bishop takes b2, but white defends it with a tactic, rook to e1. Now, of course, if you play bishop takes b2, then there's bishop d4 check, and you lose your bishop on b2. So castles by black, there's still the threat now, c3, and although you could capture on c3, black instead decides to play d5, hoping to develop more pieces. And now after a3, bishop to f5, black would definitely be better here because his two bishops are slicing the board in half. And it doesn't matter if you capture on b4 with the c pawn, or if you play bishop c5 and then capture it later. These bishops will, at some point or another, be activated, and they're going to be used very efficiently to completely cut the board in half, and they're attacking the queen side mainly. and it would just be very nice to see how these two bishops can easily cooperate with each other and just dominate the queen side. So that was the move f takes e7. The other move to play is queen to e3. And if this move is played, then just b4, similar idea. Castles, e6, and now c4. And white is giving up this f6 pawn with the idea of trying to get more development. Now, you could capture with b takes c3 en passant, but that would just let the knight develop, so just queen takes f6. Knight b to d2, bishop to g7, knight to e4, and white's development is now a lot better than black's, but at least black didn't lose too much material. King to f8, knight takes c8, queen takes e3, f takes e3, rook takes c8, and after rook takes d5, the position is fairly equal. Both sides don't really have much going on for themselves, so it's just a matter of who plays a more exciting position and who gets the initiative first and holds on to it for the remainder of the game. The last move is queen to h4, and if this move is played, then here's where things become really crazy. Black will now play the move rook to a4, and it's very nice to see how black can just use the b5 pawn to now anchor the rook that'll now reach a4, and you'll see how useful that this rook can later be on in the game. So f takes e7, bishop takes e7, queen to h6, and now black uses this rook to slide it over to e4 with check, forcing the king to lose castling privileges, and now b4. You could play bishop to f6, but always preventing this knight from reaching c3 is a nice alternative. So b4, preventing knight c3, and now bishop g5, hoping for a trade of minor pieces so that, well, then you can activate your knight as white. So queen to a5, bishop e7, and now queen b5 check. You can always capture the knight a bit later because at the moment black is only worried about white's king's safety. So queen b5 check, king g1, and now knight to d4. The idea is that if knight takes d4 is played, then there's just rook e1 checkmate. So what can you do instead? Well, you could try the move h4, but then king takes e7. And it doesn't matter if you're losing castling privileges, just the amount of attack that black is getting is just too much. And in the end, you can see how white is really going to struggle a lot to activate all of his pieces and, well, get some sort of initiative. So after knight d4, white is forced to do something very crazy. He must play the move knight to c3. And why must he play knight c3? Because he needs to find a way to at least use the rook on a1 to defend the first rank so that there's no real danger here. However, you can't play the move knight to d2, and that's because there's actually a very nice smothered mate here. Black will go knight e2 check, king to f1 by white, knight to g3 check by black, king to g1 by white, and now queen to f1 check by black. You can capture with either the rook or the knight, but it doesn't matter. Just knight e2, and this is checkmate. So that is why knight c3 must be played. Now bc3, and now knight takes d4. And here, although black could capture the knight on d4, instead c takes b2. Because usually capturing this knight on d4 would result in moves like queen g7, putting pressure towards both rooks. So c takes b2. Now if you capture the queen on b5, then there's b takes a1 queen. So rook to b1, and now queen to c4 by black. And after this move is played, the position really becomes very exciting. You're attacking the knight, and you're also attacking the bishop on e7. How does white really defend? It might be the first question on your mind. Well, let's say that white tries bishop to f6, defending this knight on d4, but also saving the bishop here. Well, in that case, then black will just go queen takes a2, attacking the rook on b1. And if the rook moves, then obviously you queen. And if you capture, then you're just going to get checkmated with rook e1 mate. So let's say you try h3. Now, unfortunately, there's queen takes b1 check, king h2, and now queen takes h1 check. And this is where things really don't work well in white's favor, because now after b1 queen check, king to h2, now black can simply defend by going rook to f8, and really there's nothing that white can do anymore. Simply queen to b4 trying to defend the rook is enough, and well, then white has simply no chances. So that is why the position is already 2 lost for white, and it doesn't really matter what black does. Best is to play the move h3, and now after, say, king takes e7, knight f3, usually just queen takes c2. It's not really the best position that white could get, but it's a position better than what I just showed you, where black would just be up tons of material. So that was the move bishop to b5. Now the final move is to play e5. And if e5 is played, then knight c6 by black, queen to a4 by white, knight to d5 by black, and now queen to e4 by white. White is trying to attack the knight so that it moves away to an unfavorable square. The knight goes to b6, and now white has 2 moves, knight c3 and bishop to f4. If bishop f4, then black goes d5, e takes d6, bishop to f5, and now queen to e2. Although d takes e7 is very tempting, it actually doesn't really result in a good position for white. Bishop takes e7, and now let's say you play queen e3, for instance. Now black can just castle. And, well, you are down a pawn as black, but look at the development that black has. Let's say a couple of more moves like knight d5, putting pressure on the f4 bishop and the e3 queen. And in any case, black would be better because of the amount of space control and the amount of development that he has. And white's extra pawn isn't really meaning anything at the moment. So that is why just queen e2, and now bishop to g7. Black fianchettas the bishop and is at the moment threatening b2. Knight c3, castles queenside, e takes d6, rook takes d6, and now queen c8. Queen to b5, and now bishop c3, bc3, and now rook to e8. And yes, white is up a pawn, but yet again, what is it really doing? There's really nothing you can say for what the pawn is doing. So bishop d3, bishop takes d3, and it really will favor black in any case, because black can activate his pieces a lot quicker than white can activate his final rook, and, well, it just matters on who gets the initiative first and hangs on to it for the rest of the game. So that was bishop to f4. The other move is knight c3, which leads to a similar variation. After d5, e takes d6. You could capture with the queen, but it would allow bishop f4, maybe knight b5, and that's why bishop f5 is played. Now here you could play d takes e7, but queen to e2 by white. Queen takes d6, knight b5, queen b8, knight bd4, and now bishop to g7. And this is an interesting position because black is willingly compromising his pawn structure. So knight takes f5, g takes f5, queen to b5, and now e6, defending the f5 pawn. Bishop goes to d3, and now both sides castle. And after rook d8, bishop g5, rook d5, even though black's pawn structure is really bad, look at black's pieces. They are working in harmony. The rook is nicely kicking the queen away from this b5 square, and let's say this queen gets developed to maybe c7 or d6. Black will have a lot of nice times just playing rook c8, maybe knight d4, and putting lots of pressure towards the white queen side. And for white, he has really nothing against black, even though there is a very open and exposed king. White can't really do anything about it. So after rook to d5, that is the end of the variation, and I hope you all enjoyed the video, and if you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please let me know in the comment section, and stay tuned for more chess.